All right. Hey, Talk Universe. We are live with Dr. Alison Escalante. How are you, Alison?
Hi, great to talk with you today, Nathan.
Well, this is going to be a lot of fun. So if you're watching this right now and you're in the middle of parenting, in the middle of what Dr. Allison calls, and I love this, the should storm, meaning that there's too much should going on and it's beating you down, you might just, or if you know anyone that has or is in the middle of that, you want to share this. So be like the creepy little kid on The Shining and wiggle your finger over the share button. Help Allison and I defeat the evil Facebook algorithm that is out to suppress really good ideas worth spreading. I just am really, really excited about what we're going to talk about today because Allison has some really simple, helpful sound bites that she's really thought through in the past. And we're not recording the podcast yet, but in the pre-interview, Dr. Allison and I were talking about your background. And I don't even remember and I don't have it in front of me, but just give me a review of that medieval studies and whatnot that it was. And it's really played a great piece in helping you come up with all these amazing frameworks and sound bites that really help take the stress out of parenting.
Well, that's right. So when I started at Princeton, I thought I was going to do molecular biology, like everybody interested in biology and science. And then I took this amazing class and ended up deciding that's it. I'm going to get a PhD in history. So I studied medieval Renaissance history, but with a specific focus on ideological and cultural history. And this is where we study how ideas shape culture and then move us so they can kind of go through a whole group of people and totally change the way we behave. And they're often hidden. We often don't think about them. Then I ended up a doctor. And before I knew it, as I was working with families, I started to realize that these kind of hidden, unexamined ideas from our culture were driving the way that we were interacting with our kids. And I thought, this is really interesting. So one of the things I find is that if you can help people identify what's driving their thinking and what those key ideas are, people have aha moments and suddenly they can make a shift in what they're doing. And so it's very, very freeing to identify those ideas. And then the doctor side of me creates practical things we can do about it when we do identify those ideas. Yeah, so that's what my work is all about.
Well, I love that. And the little pause is because, and hopefully you didn't hear this all at home. I was trying to live tag Dr. Allison and I wasn't able to do it. But what was happening was there was this feedback loop about 10-second delay. So I was hearing two Dr. Allisons. I hope that didn't come through. But
wow, that
anyway.
Sounds a little much, Dr. Allison.
Yeah, that was like two of you at the same time, and that's part of the reason why in the pre-interview I told Dr. Allison I don't do too much of the tech stuff because crazy little stuff like that can happen. You can get a little sidetracked, but this is really cool because there's so much more where this came from. If you want, I'll just tell you this before we get started with the actual podcast interview for Be the Talk. But Dr. Allison, if you haven't read her column in Psychology Today, you could probably look up a few of those columns right now. And I don't know if there's a pay gate or not, or if people could actually get a hold of those. You want to check that out because it's amazing. Obviously, as part of the podcast, we're going to give you a link to her TEDx talk, which is just off the chart. So any final questions for me, Allison, before we jump in and go live on the recording?
No, I think I'm just really excited to talk about the state of parenting today and what we can do for our kids.
It's going to be great. And we got a couple of Talk alumni that are already liking this. Andrew Wilson, good to see you, man. And Debbie Heiser, good to see you. I see Debbie's a mutual friend, and I just interviewed her, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So I don't know if Debbie was instrumental in any of this, but she, I believe, reached out to a bunch of future guests and current guests of mine. What an amazing networker right there. And if you have any questions for Dr. Alison as we're doing this interview, just type them into the comments, and then we'll swing back after the interview's over and be able to answer a few of those. Great way to get free consult. Now, and Dr. Alison, I'll say this, she's very, very clear that she doesn't do, like prescriptive or anything like that, internet Q&A, but if there's like a general thing that is possible, maybe we can do that. Did I just totally put my foot in my mouth, Alison?
So what we say is that real medical advice has to happen within the context of the doctor-patient relationship, because that's where you get the good stuff. But general educational advice is something that I can share as long as it's understood as general education.
General advice. So yes. I like that. So this hasn't degraded to the level of the Chris Farley show quite yet, because there is general advice that you can get. And I love that, because and we deal with this all the time, just because I come from a healthcare oriented family. So you've got this thing where it's like there's such a commodity. There's Dr. Google. I live right down the street from where Dr. Oz went to prep school. And people have, especially in the field, have all kinds of opinions about other celebrity doctors. And really what it comes down to is if you don't have that, just like you said, Dr. Alison, if you don't have that specific doctor-patient relationship, you can find whatever you want. And we hear about fake news, and depending on if you listen to the one kind of news channel or the other kind of news, you're going to find the answers that you really want, and they may not be the helpful answers that you need. And that's what the doctor-patient relationship is really for. So general
I can't
advice.
Quote the statistic at this point. I don't know exactly where the statistic was published, but they are now associating a higher death rate with Dr. Google. Yeah. Wow.
Well, and that would be really helpful. Something that I'd love to, I'll even say this on Facebook Live, just because this issue of, I'm sure all medical professionals would agree at some level. I mean, we want to empower people. We want to be proactive. We want we want to empower people to research and do the best they can. And yet there's this thing where it's like, if you haven't gone through the 15 or 20 years of training to really get the nuances down, there's real danger at the same time in just kind of doing your own research in your own way. And it hits right in the middle of our culture right now. There's a big can of worms, so we're not really going here, but I'm bringing it up because, like, we see it in politics and we see it in all these other things. Everybody's an expert. And so I love to find ways to empower people while also reconnecting them back with the practitioners like Dr. Alison, who really love and care for them and are devoting their life to giving the best possible quality of individual care possible.
Well, I tell my patients, I'm like, I love people who read, and I love you to get a chance to understand better what's going on. But I give them my list of recommended websites. And I say, check out my buddies at this children's hospital or at Mayo, because they are too busy to see your kid. So they don't have time to scare you with inappropriate advice, right? So they have really reliable science-based advice that's going to equip you. And I always tell people, in general, good advice makes you feel equipped. And bad advice makes you feel anxious. Yeah.
Or shoulded.
Or should it? That's
shoulded.
Right. Because
Did I say that right?
Clickbait out there, right?
We're gonna bring it right back on brand with Dr. Alison's TEDx talk.
And clickbait usually carries a whole list of shoulds in it. Yep, and that makes you feel anxious, and then you keep clicking.
How cool is that? All right. Well, we're gonna jump right in here. Now, I've never done a pre-interview that long before, but This is just a lot of fun. And I could tell right off the bat, there's so much more where all this came from. But we're going over to the podcast right now. So we're going to jump in there. I'm going to pull up my little piece right here. We got the bio. We got everything else. And we are live in 3, 2. We are live with Dr. Alison Escalante. Alison, are you ready to talk?
Oh, I love to talk.
Alison Escalante, MD, is a pediatrician on a mission with a clear 3-step method to help parents raise kids skillfully and enjoy doing it. Alison writes a column for Psychology Today, and she hosts a Facebook group, ShouldStorm. She's gone to Princeton, Duke, and the University of Chicago, and there's a whole lot more where that came from. Alison Escalante, welcome to the talk.
Well, thank you so much, Nathan. I'm really looking forward to this.
Your talk is called The Parenting ShouldStorm. I love the name. And you already talked about in the bio the 3-step method, which is to sigh, to see, and to start. And you mentioned in the talk that before you realized all of these things, you had, as a parent yourself of 2, I believe, you had should-based anxiety, but now you have confidence. So please, Alison, take us behind the talk.
Well, sure. I don't know if there are any parents more perfectionistic than pediatricians, right? Because we are trained in child development and we have access to all the science and the understanding of the science. So when I had my first son, for instance, and this was not in my TEDx, he had a rare kind of food allergy, and it caused a kind of colitis, right? At that time, to continue to breastfeed him, I needed to go on a very restrictive diet. But I was getting daily doctor emails on breastfeeding research, which and with snappy titles that basically implied that my son's IQ would be lower and his life would be ruined if I didn't continue to breastfeed. I went on an incredibly restrictive diet. And this was before anyone knew about quinoa. So I was on basically a soy-free vegan diet, very low protein. And I didn't quit until I actually started fainting.
Oh,
that kind,
oh.
I know.
Oh.
That kind of driving yourself to a place where some things may have been lost or in a negative way impacted because of my drive to do that best thing for my child. But what about all those other things? I was so exhausted. I think we effectively bonded, but I think that a lot of our bonding had to be done after that time when I wasn't so stressed and distracted by my mission to breastfeed.
Well, and you have competing commitments at that point because you have this commitment as a mom, but then you have this triple standard because you are the kid pro as a professional, yet you are experiencing for the first time what all of your patients are experts in, which is learning the chaos of parenting. So I cannot imagine. And then you have the standard of perfection. So I can see why your talk is, frankly, I'm not yet a parent, but it's got to be so reassuring for people because it's all about sidestepping the ShouldStorm and the point behind all of this stuff. You have some great personal stories and experiences, but anxious parents produce anxious kids. And we can see, I always like to cross-reference episode 150 of Be the Talk. Dr. Michael Hines, the superintendent of the Long Island School District, way out there, who talks about whole child education and developing social and emotional intelligence as well as just intellectual and also physical. And it's like we see this is so interesting because we're seeing kind of the inception of where it all starts, the anxious parents who are trying to do it all, trying to avoid being social shamed, trying to avoid making the big mistake that'll cause the tweet and the photo to go viral. And then the government, knocks on the door or whatever. I've actually had friends that have, kind of free ranged their children and had things like that happen to them. And it's just insane. So what a great voice of sanity. Mirror image, I'm going to point this way to you, Dr. Alison. Anxious parents produce anxious kids. So can you speak right now? There are first-time parents or soon-to-be first-time parents who are freaking out right now, just like you did. What would you say to them right now?
Guys, your baby doesn't need all that stuff. They don't need all the exact right things to stimulate their development that you guys ask me about all the time. They need you. That's what our kids need. And it's what they want. And when I'm present with my kids, not distracted, not driven by anxiety, my kids tell me how much that matters to them. They're old enough they can tell me now. But guys, it's you. And I know that's actually really alarming to be told. You are enough. And I can help you get to a place where you actually feel confident about that. And that's what the 3 steps are about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think we need to just look at the issue again, the problem again. I mean, the shoulds, there's a really good piece about the shoulds that actually meet a need according to your talk. And that's because they give us certainty. I mean, we get into that judger brain and then we have certainty. We can make decisions. We can carry on in our friction-filled, stressful life with all these shoulds, but then they become a big burden. And you have the 3-step process. Instead of stop, drop, and roll, what do we have instead?
We have sigh, see, and start. So whenever you feel not sure, you're going to feel anxious and you're going to look for a should. But the shoulds are not going to help you be present or be the great parent you want to be. So when you feel a should, sigh, see, and start. Sigh deep into your body. And this is really important. Let it out really slow, because that moves us into the calm and connected centers in our nervous system, out of fight or flight. Then see. Really see your child. See the situation. See what they're acting like. Then, and only then, start something. Start nothing. Start the wrong thing. This is my favorite part, Nathan, because when we start the wrong thing, we might trigger another should. And that's okay. You just sigh, see, and start again. So we get to start using our mistakes to grow instead of being so afraid of our mistakes. Instead of a world where we're told you should get it right and you should not make mistakes, we get to understand that our mistakes actually help us connect and be better parents. So I'm really excited about this.
Well, I'm excited too, because you didn't get this philosophy from your medical training. I know that, because there's no thinner, zero margin for error culture anywhere than the modern American healthcare system. So this is so, I don't understand Talk Universe. If you come from any, if you have an uncle or an aunt who's a nurse or a physician or a pharmacist or whatever, they will tell you, if you hung out with them enough, you see the pressure, you see that there is not this kind of tolerance and grace and openness to discovery. But this is beautiful, because Dr. Alison kind of has one foot solidly in that world still, as a board certified professional who's doing everything that needs to be done. But then she's got another foot in our world, the world where, we've hyper optimized ourselves almost to death. We've shoulded ourselves almost to death. And the only way is to loosen the belt a little bit and to be mindful and to really take a systems view so that we can make sense of our world. Now, if you want to, before we pivot over to the blitz round, I'm going to tell you, sigh, see, and start. Those are the 3, correct? Sigh, see, and start. So it's so easy. A podcaster can remember it after a couple of reviews, which is a great framework. Sigh, see, and start. If you want to, I'm not going to embarrass Dr. Alison by bringing up the actual story that you can watch in her TED Talk that talks about how extreme she takes this. Not going to say that right now, because we want you to watch this. You will be picking your jaw off the floor, and it really underscores Dr. Alison's piece here that don't should yourself, learn, do something better. If you make a mistake and it leads to another mistake, surprise, you're a human, join the club, and then stop making the same mistakes. I love it. I love it. I love it. Before we go over to the blitz round, Dr. Alison, what's your take on that?
When parents start to lose their should, we grow, and then our kids have space to grow with us. We have an anxiety epidemic, Nathan. The latest Stress in America survey from the APA says 91% of Gen Zers are reporting physical or emotional symptoms of anxiety or depression.
91%. So we got 9% are,
okay.
healthy, okay,
Yeah, now that's an alarming statistic, and it's not, I am never saying that parenting is all to blame. Of course not. There are so many reasons our kids are stressed, but parenting is a place where our kids have that space to either receive grace and grow resilience or get pushed farther into the burden. And so that's where we can really start to lose our should so that our kids can lose their should.
We've been enjoying this conversation with Dr. Alison Escalante. Her talk is called The Parenting ShouldStorm, and we're going to pivot over to you, Talk Universe, in just a moment when we enter the Blitz round.
All right.
And we're back with the Blitz round. We have Dr. Alison Escalante with us. I'm going to ask her a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and actual performance of her recent talk. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
First question, were you invited to speak or did you apply?
I applied, but what I did is I went to TEDx Naperville. I had such a great time. And then I happened to connect with Arthur Zards, the curator, in the after party. And I said, hey, Arthur, I've got a great idea. And he let me pitch it in my 60-second pitch, and he loved it.
Love it. Yeah. So I'm reversing this. So you went as you bought a ticket and you went to an event. You didn't buy the ticket that you spoke at. You did kind of what the best in class do when they're not invited. They buy a ticket. Yeah. They support the local community TEDx, and then go up to the organizer or go up to somebody on the team and find out, if there's kind of an advantaged higher touch way to actually get a little bit of a leg up on the application process. So good for you. That's and the reason that I'm going into this level of detail is most of us have to apply. I had to apply,
right.
And that would be good advice for any of us that have to apply as opposed to being invited to speak. Alison, are you a memorizer, improviser, or blender?
Blender, definitely a blender. Memorize to the point where you know it's so cold that you can be completely authentic when you do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's another tip, tool, or technique that you would recommend?
For me, this was about knowing my subject so deeply that I was able to explain it simply. So this is the fruit of 10 years of work in my life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to push back, but I want to reinvestigate that because the curse of expertise is that we completely lose the perspective and the language, and we adopt all kinds of weird, hyper expert language that regular people, even educated, TED audiences that are outside of that field, they can't follow. So how did you, I'm really interested in how did you kind of language or deprogram yourself from the normal industry speak that you would normally have?
Well, that's where my patients are my teachers, because I'm a full-time pediatrician, right? And every day I need to help people understand in their anxiety, when it's hard to listen, when you're anxious, how their kids are doing and why what is happening. So I've learned over the years how to explain complex subjects in that way. So really, I guess the way to learn is talking to people outside of your field and seeing what works best for them to understand it. But also, I wanted to find something catchy because I knew that people remember better that way. And I knew that alliterations work great for us to remember and then be able to act upon.
Yeah. Funny. Pedagogy as well as teaching, that's teaching children, but andragogy is teaching adults. And I think both of us, if you can just find a framework that just is the simpler, the better, the more repetition, the more same letter, that as long as it's clear, very, very, very helpful. Final question. What was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
Well, for me, it was that I happened to be working with a really brilliant woman getting my book pitch ready to go because I'm looking for an agent. And this was 4 days before I was scheduled to give my talk. And I was working full-time in my clinic prior to that. And we started talking about my talk. And she had a couple of great suggestions to tighten it up. I rewrote the thing after I got off the phone with her. I rewrote
4 days to go.
4 days. And
4 days, you're working 80, 90-hour weeks already.
Yeah, not quite 90.
My gosh.
Yeah, and I had it stone cold memorized already, so I had to re-memorize it. I went into the talk in a state of what I call controlled panic. But when I got out on stage and I felt the connection, because as Arthur would say, you have no more gracious audience than a TEDx audience. They just want you to win. And when we connected to each other and I felt them engaging with my ideas, it was just the most wonderful shared experience. Yeah, really fun.
We've been enjoying this Blitz round with Dr. Alison Escalante. Her talk is called The Parenting ShouldStorm. And if you want to find out more information on that, if you want to watch it, go to our show notes page at bethetalk.com, or you can type it into YouTube and check it out. You also want to check out her Psychology Today articles, and you can go to her website at theprimarycarer.com. That's care with an R at the end, theprimarycarer.com. And we'll be back in just a moment with Dr. Alison Escalante's final word of advice. And we're back with Alison Escalante's final word of advice for Talk Universe.
Don't let the shoulds crush you, whether it's in your parenting or your work life or in your coming TEDx talk. Whenever you feel a should, sigh, see, and start.
Alison Escalante, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thank you so much, Nathan. This has really been a blast.
All right, podcast is over. We are still broadcasting here. My buddy Paul... Good to see Paul Gustafson here. What's up, brother? This is a friend of mine.
Hi, Paul.
Rocking it, starting the new year. That's what we're doing. Paul does military, his company that he and his co-founders founded, they do military simulations for different branches of the Army, which is really, really cool. This is a great interview. Should happens. It sure does. It sure does, Paul. Well, hey, any general advice, if you're watching this and we are not live anymore, that's good. Oh, he just gave us a nice little like right there. Thank you, sir. And if you want any general advice, you can always reach out, and we want you to share this because everybody's getting shooted down. We're trying to optimize ourselves. We're resolutionizing ourselves to death this week. Everybody's in the gym. Everybody's not eating, chocolate. They're not eating their normal comfort food. Nerves are being frayed, and there's a way to not slack off in a bad way, but to take all of this added wrongful pressure off. And you hear it right here from a board certified medical professional who's been in the field for decades here. Alison, any final word to our broadcast here before we go offline?
This is a zigzag, but the thing that I've really learned from working with kids is that when you are present, your life is filled with wonder every day. And what's interesting is when I look at kids, I'm filled with wonder because everything they do is so amazing for the first time. And then you can take that to the way you look at other adults. And that's when life's real.
Good stuff. Well, I can't wait to remain present. And we're going to shut this broadcast down. Thank you for your shares. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your likes. And again, thank you, Dr. Alison, for your time.
Thank you, Nathan. This was great.